Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, October 21st, 2013, start of a brand new week of the usual insanity that we've sort of the hallmark of life in the United States these days. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny the Magnificent is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phones when you call on in. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. A couple of quick program notes. Tomorrow, Keith Johnson, who's over at Activist Post, is going to be our guest talking about gun rights. And I'm sorry, he's on Wednesday, and then Thursday we're going to have Brandon Turbeville, also from Activist Post, talking about Syria and Egypt. And a reminder that tomorrow night I will be the 3-hour guest on Coast to Coast AM, talking about a wide variety of subjects. We're trading emails back and forth. Let's talk about this, let's talk about that. So it's kind of up in the air what we'll talk about, but we're probably going to talk about the Kennedy assassination, certainly the economy, the Obamacare debacle, and all these other things here. Now, obviously, the top news coming in over the weekend, healthcare.gov, the Obamacare website, has been taken down to fix the glitches. And apparently, Obama has set a deadline of November 1st for it to be fixed. And I'm laughing because it's very obvious that Mr. Obama knows absolutely nothing about software development on large-scale deployments, and it is estimated by experts working on the system that some 5 million lines of computer code will have to be rewritten to deal with all the problems. And the head of the company that created this is saying that Obama's November 1st deadline is unrealistic, which is putting it probably as politely as you can without having the Secret Service come in and break your legs for you or something like that. Now, apparently, according to the Office of Budget Management, they did a little calculation and found out that for this Obamacare system, with all that they've spent on it and all that they've invested, it will take a minimum of 7 million people to sign up and buy the new higher-priced health insurance just to break even. 7 million. Everybody's hemming and hawing about how many have gotten through. The White House is saying 51,000 people have succeeded in signing up. The health insurance companies are saying, no, we haven't gotten anywhere near that number of applications coming in. It absolutely is a flustercluck, and everybody's trying to go for political coverage on this thing. And, of course, the White House is saying, it's just glitches. It's minimum thing here. It's a hiccup. No, it isn't. It's a complete and utter failure. And Obama was planning not only his historical legacy, but his effectiveness in the final 3 years of his term, as well as Democratic chances in next year's election on having Obamacare as their flagship program. Look what we gave to you, vote us back in. And it's going to backflash on them something terribly here. One of the spokespeople for the government was out there saying that the launch was a bit rougher than we hoped for. And I imagine Captain E.J. Smith of the Titanic was probably thinking the same thing as that water came crashing in on him. Speaking of the Titanic, apparently Wallace Hartley's violin just sold at auction for £900,000, which is amazing because they're not exactly 100% sure it was really his. Anyway, getting back to Obamacare, much of the code is written in JavaScript, where if you know how to do it, you can go out and type in the script name itself and download the code and look at it yourself. And it's just filled with typos, all kinds of very unpolite comments by the programmers, and you can study the architecture and see this thing was just thrown together in very much a shoot-from-the-hip fashion. It lacks a top-down architectural structure. It is a complete disaster there. And the fact that they were writing it in JavaScript, to me, now I've gotten a lot of emails challenging me on this thing, but JavaScript leaves it wide open to hacking. Now, there is a compiled version of Java. It's also client-side code. They're basically offloading the processing work onto your computer. They're making your computer do the processing work to sign you up for Obamacare. And a lot of websites do that. That's what JavaScript is for, is to have your machine doing some of the distributed work so that the server has a little bit lighter workload. But there is a compiled version of Java which can be downloaded and run client-side as well. That's why the Java interpreter is downloaded in part of your browsers here. But experts are saying it's going to take 5 million lines of the code to be rewritten to fix all of the accumulated problem. Now, Obama is out there earlier today. He's up there speechifying and acting indignant. He's madder than heck. And he says, well, you know, Obamacare is good. That's our wonderful thing. But there's no excuse for the website problems. Harumph. There's no excuse. This is terrible, and I'm mad. Well, Mr. President, back when Harry Truman sat at your desk, he had a sign on it that read, "The buck stops here." And that was true then, and it is true now. The people who hacked together this abomination of a software system were screaming months ago it was nowhere near ready to launch. The wise and prudent management decision from the White House would have been to accept the House of Representatives deal to delay Obamacare for 1 year as a condition for raising the debt ceiling, and had you done so, we could have avoided this whole government shutdown circus. But you, Mr. President, listened to your ego. You saw your name on Obamacare. And let us be honest, right now you need that expected $200 billion in new tax revenues to lure lenders now that the debt ceiling has been waived. And you forced that launch anyway over the advice of the people who actually built the system. This is very reminiscent of when the Morton Thiokol engineers warned about frozen O-rings and the inadvisability of firing those rockets up with frozen O-rings, but NASA management recklessly went ahead and launched the Challenger anyway, with pretty much the same outcome as the launch of Obamacare, as it turns out. So don't stand there and act like you had nothing to do with this disaster, Mr. President, because it was your hand on that launch button, yours and yours alone. Now, everybody's bandying numbers about the success or failure of Obamacare. MSNBC came out and said the Obama administration is lying about the enrollment data. They're trying to put as positive a face on this as they can. And of course they're going to lie. That's all they know how to do. That's all they know how to do to run this country, lie about things. Assad's chemical weapons, Saddam's nuclear weapons, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. So of course they're going to be lying again. Now, remember John McAfee? We had him on our show last week, and apparently it sparked quite a bit of interest. He's either has done or will be doing Coast to Coast as well. It was on ABC TV, basically telling them the same thing he said on our show. Hackers will be able to get into the bank account information of everybody who enrolls, because you have to type that all in before you even look at those health insurance policies. And even if you opt out, the information is still in the computer system. And hackers can empty your bank account because there's zero security on this thing. And he says it would be just trivial, given how simple it looks, to create fake Obamacare websites, and we're already seeing them pop up. Go in, hack the DNS to direct people over to the wrong website, and just loot all their information here. Now, meanwhile, over the weekend, Senator John McCain came out strongly in support of the fight against human-caused global warming. He's basically signing on to the carbon Nazi agenda, and it only reinforces the fact as Obamacare continues to crater, they're going to go back to human-caused global warming, and they're going to start pushing for a carbon tax because this government is desperate for more of your money by hook or by crook, emphasis on crook. So that's what's going on here. Obamacare is not getting that windfall of tax revenues, so they're going to be back to carbon taxes and anything else they can think of to take more of your money away because they are desperate. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Finishing up with Obamacare. Of course, if you don't sign up for your Obamacare-compliant health insurance, the IRS is going to start assessing fines against you, and they can go right into your bank account and just take the money. And you know what's going to happen? Because hardly anybody can sign up for Obamacare, they're going to start pulling their money out of the bank. This could actually crash the banking system. when Americans realize that even with the best of intentions, they can't get the new, higher-priced, higher-deductible insurance packages, and the IRS is going to go after their bank accounts. So people are going to say, you shouldn't be keeping any more in your banks than you need to cover your immediate obligations anyway. Look what happened in Cyprus. Now, moving along and speaking of epic fails, as you're probably aware, Fifth Estate, the movie about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, opened this past weekend, and it is an absolute dud, a box office bomb. The worst opening weekend for any movie released this year. It made something like a total of $1.7 million from something like 1,700 cinemas around America. They were trying to do what's called a fast burn in the industry. If you've got a movie and you don't think it's going to do all that good, you put it into as many theaters as you can for the opening weekend. You launch a huge advertising campaign. We've been seeing the commercials everywhere. You get the stars to appear on talk shows like Graham Norton. They had the star of the film on that, pushing the thing, and then you try and get as much money as you can before word of mouth destroys the movie. So they had it in 1,700 theaters around America, and it took in a grand total from all those theaters of $1.7 million. That is an absolute epic fail. Now, opening weekends, the advertising campaigns notwithstanding, the opening weekends tend to be more a measure of public acceptance of the film's topic, and then the following weeks reflect more the merits of the film itself. And in this case, it would appear that a lot of people have come to the same conclusion about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks that I did. That he is a wholly manufactured propaganda front promoted by the corporate media as the go-to place for whistleblowers to head said whistleblowers off before they can get to other bloggers who have a real track record. Now, what made me suspicious about Julian Assange right from day one was the fact that just 3 months after he registered the domain WikiLeaks, and before he had even leaked anything of any significance, he made the covers of Time and Newsweek. Then there was the way that Assange tried to take credit for the ClimateGate leaks, even though they'd been on a Russian blog first. And then there was that very strange incident where Assange announced he had some very damaging material against one of the big banks that would be released some weeks after the announcement, which is always a dangerous thing to do if you're holding secrets worth killing to keep hidden. And then the weeks passed, and suddenly Assange claimed the information on the bank had been lost. We don't know where it went. It was on just this one little drive, and it just walked away. And Julian Assange, although supposedly supported by private donations, suddenly had a surplus of cash, was flying around the world, living a jet-set life, including sex scandals that only amplified his name in the tabloids, which suggests that rather than being a whistleblower website, he was running an extortion racket. People would come in with information about crimes committed by corporations and banks and politicians, and Assange would announce we were going to release this thing and then wait for the phone calls to come in with the offers. And of course, finally, not once in its operation has WikiLeaks ever released anything damaging regarding Israel. Now, being from the film industry, I hate to see any film flop, and I feel sorry for anyone who did this movie on a back-end deal, which I presume many people did because its total production budget was $30 million, which means it has to take in something close to $100 million just to break even before anybody gets any profit participation on the back end. And with only $1.7 million in its opening weekend, this thing is never going to break even. But it may signal that the WikiLeaks flash in the pan is over, and blogs that have been doing the real work for decades will start to move back into the public focus here. We're going to go to the phones. Alex in Texas. Aloha. Alex, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there? Okay, I guess we didn't get him. I can hear myself talking in the background, but I already talked to myself just here on the microphone. So, moving right ahead. Over at Ron Paul's website, the campaignforliberty.org, he's got a very, very telling and accurate article. This debt ceiling deal that was achieved 11th hour in the shutdown with all the drama about closed monuments and national parks going on, it's a victory for the special interests. And it's a disaster for we, the American people. And remember, they didn't lift the debt ceiling. They waived it entirely until they come back to this issue next year, which means between now and 2014, the Obama administration has a brand new credit card with no debt limit on it. And they're just already piling up huge amounts of debt on this thing. It's just amazing. And Ron Paul, and he didn't write the article, but it's on Campaign for Liberty. But it does reflect his views about just how completely out of control this situation is. Now, here we are in 2013, and finally, under the press of public opinion, the U.S. government is finally starting to deal with some of these too-big-to-jail banks that were behind the mortgage-backed security fraud of 2008, the collapse of which is what really triggered all of this hardship we've been dealing with for all these years. And so now the Department of Justice has come up with a tentative settlement with J.P. Morgan Chase that involves a $13 billion settlement, which is pennies on the dollar for how much J.P. Morgan made from this whole fraud. It's another financial wrist slap. I know to you and I, $13 billion sounds like a heck of a lot, but it isn't. Not when you're dealing with money on that scale. But that hasn't stopped the Wall Street and J.P. Morgan from screaming, the U.S. government is robbing us. They only did it because we criticized Obama and it's an attack on capitalism. And it's kind of fun to hear the money junkies going into their withdrawal symptoms because they're all out there with sweaty hair and scratching their arms and saying, I need a $100 bill real quick. Now, slight correction here. Capitalism is investing money to make products that are sold for a profit. That's capitalism. When you cheat and game the system to bring unearned wealth to yourself at the expense of others, that is not capitalism, that is fascism. And that is exactly where we are today. And the money junkies love fascism. That's why the money junkies back in 1933 literally plotted a coup d'etat against Franklin Roosevelt, with the intention of establishing a fascist-style economy in the United States modeled after the one that Mussolini then had in Italy. And they came very, very close to pulling it off. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Alex in Texas, are you there? Okay. All righty. Let's see. Another story we're getting out here. The Guardian in Great Britain is now reporting that the Barclays executives, the top-level executives, did know that LIBOR was being manipulated as early as 2007. Remember when the LIBOR rigging came out and all these top executives were saying, oh, it was just a low-level clerk. We had absolutely no idea that this was going on. And, we're innocent. We can't go to jail. Well, wrong. Guardian now has memos detailing that top management at Barclays knew the LIBOR was being rigged to generate additional profit at the expense of everybody else on Earth. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. Frank, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael, very good. I remember you'd done the interview last year on Coast to Coast, and it was a fabulous interview you gave. I listened to it on Coast to Coast Live. But I was a little disappointed in you that you didn't invite the guest onto your radio show. That would have been a nice in-kind invitation on your invitation to come to your show.
Which guest?
John B. Wells. When you spoke on John B. Wells, I was surprised you didn't invite him to come on as a guest on your radio show. That would have been a nice gesture. And also have the Coast listeners get a hold of some Michael Rivero listeners, and we can start talking to each other, because that's what we're lacking. We're not talking enough to each other.
Well, talking to each other is all well and good, but the reality is we're at the stage right now where we need to start talking to people who are not part of our already aware community. And I don't remember John B. Wells. I'll certainly look at him as a potential guest here. I'm trying to get more and more guests onto the show here right now, and I'm finding it a lot easier to get some of the higher caliber guests on here as well to basically get some of this information out here, like the problems with Obamacare. We're going to try Alex in Texas one more time. Alex, are you there? Third time's a charm?
Yes, sir.
We got him! We got him! All right, listen, what's on your mind today?
Well, I was calling because I was putting a couple things together after reading some things. I was writing an article, and I just started thinking, I started putting things together because we had an October 1st deadline for a lot of FEMA things and a lot of, I guess you could say, preparations that the government was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here thinking that the reason the generals have been fired last week or the week before was because they were supposed to explode a nuclear weapon off of the east coast of the United States, and it didn't happen. And and I'm beginning to think that that's also why they wanted to bomb Syria, so that there could be some type of environment where we could say, okay, our enemies are in the Middle East, and they're the ones who bombed us, and that's why they had this whole thing with FEMA Region 3 and the whole nine. But the whole scope of it comes to I guess a culmination when you look at the financial aspects of things, and what you just mentioned last Friday about them not really raising a ceiling, or not really not having.
They didn't raise the debt limit. They just waived it completely until next year. Exactly.
I'm thinking that if they can't get a war started or some type of global calamity, and God forbid it's some type of SARS type of disease thing, or bird flu, or because when the wars fail, out come these Spanish flus and black plagues and whatnot. It's not like they haven't tried them before in history, and I'm just very wary that something like this might be their next thing, simply because there's so many ways that people are just so vulnerable, especially because they don't understand how intangible signals work, from their electronics and their cell phones and things like that.
Okay, well, you're kind of wandering around here a little bit, so let me sort of pull back and get things back into focus. There is no question that there is a segment of our government who is tasked with always coming up with plans that can be used to shape public opinion towards a given agenda. Most of these plans get canceled. A very famous case of that, of course, is Operation Northwoods, that went pretty much up to the top levels of the U.S. government before the plug was pulled, and that was to use fake terror attacks to start another war with Cuba. But, of course, the deal that Kennedy made with Khrushchev regarding Cuba to get rid of to get past the Cuban Missile Crisis was that if the U.S. ever invades Cuba again, it will mean automatic war with Russia. So starting with President Johnson, the upper levels of our government are always putting the kibosh on that kind of a thing. So basically, these plans get set, they move into position, and then at the very last second they decide whether they're going to go live or not. But the more we talk about how much we're expecting government false flags, that actually acts as a deterrent. Because what is really going to stop the government from carrying out more false flags, whether it's a nuke off the coast of South Carolina or the rest, and we're getting more booga booga terror warnings today. They're talking about there's a credible threat that 4 cities in the Midwest will have their water supply poisoned. So they're out there ramping up the fear on that one again. But doubt is our most potent weapon against a new false flag, because the perpetrators of these hoaxes, when they realize they're dealing with an American people that are literally expecting the government to pull another dirty trick, that makes pulling a dirty trick a very, very high-risk operation. Okay?
No, that's exactly what I was thinking, because this past Saturday we had a rally here in San Antonio. You might have heard about it. There was over 1,000 people down at the Alamo with their guns out. And I think that the collective consciousness, at least here in Texas, is very accepting of the fact that there's a group of shadow individuals, you could say, that are behind the scenes that are trying to do something to co-opt us. The thing is, they're so, it's like how you said, they poison the well of truth so much that you don't know which one's actually legit and which one's actually, kind of playing you. And well,
again, the guide that I use when you are dealing with some kind of a story coming out of the corporate media or the government is to look for what should be there and isn't as a benchmark to determine whether the story makes sense or not. And it is a very, very powerful tool to use. Anyway, Alan...
Okay, go ahead, Mike. I apologize. You have yourself a good day.
All right, yeah. Well, we're going to let you go here and get back to the news here because we do have a lot of stuff to talk about. Mark Faber is out there talking about this quantitative easing. You know, they keep talking about tapering it off because it's causing inflationary pressures and devaluing the money that you've already worked for and already put in your pocket or in that mayonnaise jar buried out by the pineapple plantation. But Mark Faber is saying that because Wall Street and the federal government have now become so dependent on this instantly created money every month, and especially with Washington, D.C. now having no debt ceiling to worry about, quantitative easing is going to start growing way, way beyond that $85 billion a month and could eventually hit as high as $1 trillion a month, in which case we're going to be in Zimbabwe territory out there. Even Jim Cramer over at CNBC, who's normally rah-rah cheering on Wall Street and, you know, they're great and you should invest, even he is saying the U.S. has become a laughingstock around the world, worse than Italy, and we've lost the faith of a lot of countries, and yes, we know that because countries are turning away from the U.S. dollar faster than the U.S. can conquer them and force them back on. And here's one that is probably going to stick in a lot of people's craw. You know, when the whole shutdown happened and we were being told about these poor government workers, they were on furlough and they were suffering so much, and you had to call Congress and tell them raise the debt ceiling because all these wonderful government workers were they were suffering so much. And then we find out they're getting interest-free loans from, to basically tide them over. And they were going to get their back pay anyway once the shutdown was over. So it was like a paid vacation. And here's a good one coming out of Oregon. The state government of Oregon has now informed all those furloughed government workers inside Oregon they do not have to give back all the unemployment money they got when they were furloughed. So they actually wound up getting more money from the shutdown. Anybody out there in the private sector who got a sweet deal like that? I don't think so. All righty. Now, as you're probably aware, next month, food stamp benefits are getting reduced. And, of course, this is going to impact Thanksgiving for a lot of Americans. Yes, let us be thankful for this empty table. But tons and tons of money for bombs, bullets, butter, nukes, new weapons that don't really work. Over in Great Britain, as you're probably aware, we're going into another really hard winter. Heating bills have gone up 10%. People are complaining. And the response of the British government is just put on more warm clothes. Really, stop yelling at us, Stop, quit complaining and whining. Just, in your home, just bundle up like an Eskimo and you'll be just fine. Now, if they could take anger and turn it into an energy source, all the problems would be solved because there's a lot of angry people out there. We will be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones here, just looking in the mailbox, somebody just sent me this video, and I had seen it before but forgotten about it completely, where Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, came out attacking the 9/11 truth movement. And if that does not tell you that Assange and WikiLeaks was a complete propaganda hoax from the beginning, nothing will. Because there was fertile ground regarding 9/11, and he never went there. I mean, Edward Snowden's leaks are far more substantive than what came out of Julian Assange. We should be making movies about Edward Snowden at this particular point here. Somebody also wrote in reminding me that the reason this particular company got the Obamacare software is they're heavy Obama donors. And you know something, as this software debacle continues to unravel, and Congress is already calling for hearings on how this could be so badly botched, It's going to come back that Obama just gave this contract to a company in Canada when American programmers are working in fast food restaurants because it was payback for a huge donation. And this company shopped most of the low-level work to programming sweatshops in India. And I don't mean to denigrate the programmers in India, but you can't manage a software project across the globe like that easily. And I think this big stink over how the Obamacare software system was using this freely available data management software and took the copyrights out of theirs, they probably turned around and billed the government. Say, oh, look at this wonderful data management thing we wrote, and we need another $250,000 to pay for that. I think that's what was going on. All right, Dan in Oregon. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. Thank you for accepting this call. I know, you can speculate anything and not based on fact, but I'm just going to make a statement and I'd like to get your comment. All the melee that's going on, it's almost like I feel like it's a snowball going down a hill dealing with Obama and his presidency. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but get the feeling that, I guess the term is projected programming by the powers to be, getting us tenderized and getting ready for the false flag for Obama to declare martial law and to give himself another term as presidency. And it's not so far-fetched if you think about it, in the sense of during 9/11 with the mayor of New York. His term was up, and they were encouraging him to continue on for another year or two without the election during this transition. So you same rationale might be used by Obama, whatever the false flag is.
Well, I'm sure the idea has probably occurred to him. I mean, sure, a lot of ideas occur to the government here. The question is, can they successfully convince the American people to go along with it? And the answer is no. You've got an American population that is just absolutely not trusting or believing anything this government is doing. As each of these new failures come along, it's another reason for the American people to realize this government is hopelessly broken, hopelessly corrupt, and again, they're always planning these little hoaxes like Operation Northwoods to try and scare us into going along with whatever the agenda is. Most of them get the plug pulled. And right now, especially as hardly anybody bought the official story of the Boston bombing, nobody bought the lies about Assad gassing his own people. The days when this government and corporate media could just put out any nonsense and have it be believed by the majority of the American people, those days are gone forever. They're not coming back.
Well, Mike, I agree with what you're saying, dealing with the people. But if this scenario did exist, it would be Congress and the Senate that would have to do the voting on to extend some act, whatever is in the law.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. Starting with Richard Nixon, there's a whole series of executive orders that if the president declares a state of national emergency, all sorts of authorities are activated and Congress doesn't need to vote on. In fact, Congress gets suspended. The question is, what kind of a national calamity would that be? And certainly an economic crash is on that list. But again, the president can get up there and say it's a national emergency, Congress is suspended, you have to do what I tell you. Whether the American people, 80% of whom own firearms, would go along with that or not is, of course, a completely different question.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for your comment.
All right, we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Art, are you there? Mike. There you are. Good.
Well, before I get to what I called in about, I don't care what Obama does. If he tries a move like that, I got two words for him, and neither one of them can be mentioned on air.
Okay.
In fact, I don't care what he or anybody in Washington says. I got two words for all of them, and neither one can be said on air.
I don't recognize it's not a legitimate government any longer. The government in Washington, D.C. is legal and legitimate only when they follow the rules in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And it is up to the American people to decide what that Constitution and Bill of Rights is supposed to mean. Exactly. It's our Constitution. It's our Bill of Rights. And either you play by the rules or you have the decency to resign.
Exactly. And I don't really care what's legal and what's not legal. I care about what's lawful. But on this debt ceiling thing, let me see if I got this right. We had a shutdown for 17 days, debt budget, and an issue with Obamacare, a.k.a. the Affordable Health Care Act, whereas 6% of the federal government, which are deemed to be non-essential personnel, well, if they're non-essential, let them go find another job somewhere. Well, there are no other jobs anywhere else. But we go through all this hoopla and nightmarish BS over the debt ceiling and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They decide, okay, here's what we're going to do, and they get this little bill through that raises or actually waives the debt ceiling, giving them a credit card with no limit whatsoever on it. And, well, gee, I think about a week and a half ago I said that this is exactly what was going to happen, and I warned people what they were going to do immediately after. And what are we finding out now? We're sending $1.8 billion to Pakistan. Excuse me, am I missing something here?
Oh, yeah, they're already out spending money on all the things that Americans do not approve of, and spending on things that we need is what's being cut. We're in a wartime budget, a wartime economy. They don't want to admit that, but we are well and truly into World War III, and government spending reflects that, and it's going to get worse because we are losing. All these nations that we have conquered, they're already turning away from us. Over in Afghanistan, we've been there longer than we were in World War I, World War II. China's apparently getting most of that oil.
Well, see, this is what just absolutely pisses me off about these people. They sit there and play this dog and pony show for people about the terrible calamity that's going to befall if we don't blah, 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 blah. Well, now that we just stuck it right deep inside you, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add insult to injury. We're going to fire those printing presses up, and we're going to just toss another $1.8 billion into the laps of the Pakistani corruption government so that they can filter that money into the pockets of the generals like they've been doing.
It's a bribe. It's a bribe to allow the U.S. to go on carrying out the drone strikes, because the drone strikes are already under international condemnation. The United Nations is saying it's a violation of international law. If Pakistan were to stand up and say, yeah, we oppose the drone strikes, that would bring even more pressure on the U.S. to call the program off, and the U.S. doesn't want to back down. So it's just easier to take money from the American people and use it to bribe the Pakistan government, so they'll look the other way and say, yeah, go ahead and blow up a few hundred of our people. We don't care, as long as we get our cash.
You know what? Yo, Obi wanna be a Kenobi? Let me tell you something, Bam Bam. I don't know what you people up there think you're doing, but not in my backyard.
Oh, yeah, people are getting angry. And you know what's really scary? What's really scary? When we come back from we're coming up on a commercial break, I'm seeing more and more evidence of just how completely out of touch this government is with what's really going on in the minds of the American people. And that got hammered home to me because back when they were trying to push this lie about Syria gassing its own people, I wrote Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii, and I laid out all the reasons why that absolutely could not be true. And I got back a form letter saying, oh, yes, we're very upset that Assad is gassing his own people. They're not even reading the emails anymore. And I got emails from my other listeners here in Hawaii who got exactly the same form letter. They are hopelessly out of touch. They're clueless inside the Beltway. We got to take a break for Phyllis Shapley and commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show, hour number 2. And before we go back to the phones here, a couple of stories that we really do need to mention that are breaking right now. We're seeing some shootings in a couple of different places across the country. Over in Nevada, there's been a shooting at a middle school. 2 dead, 2 injured, supposedly a student with a gun. Details still coming out about that one, but of course the question the corporate media is not asking is, was this kid on prescription antidepressants or medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? And we have another one just now breaking over in Las Vegas at a club there. Apparently somebody pulled out a gun and started shooting in an argument over the cover charge. And I think it's legitimate to ask there, was this guy on some kind of prescription psychiatric medication? Because those cover charges aren't all that big in Las Vegas. This is clearly showing symptoms of impaired judgment. And of course, my concern is, now we're finding out that something like 20% of Americans overall are on prescription antidepressants. There was a study in Florida showing that police are more likely to be on prescription antidepressants than the general population. We know that during his first term it was reported that Obama was being treated for depression. If these people are all on these dangerous medications, it explains a great deal that we have seen in this country over the last several years, including poor quality judgments coming out of Washington, D.C., the epidemic of just completely out of control police brutality, and yet neither the government or corporate media will do anything about the problem because that would harm the profits of the giant pharmaceutical industries. All right, we're going to go to the phones here. Damon in Tampa. Aloha, Damon. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How's it going, Mike?
Doing okay for a Monday.
Oh, yeah. Sorry if I sound nervous. Like I said, this is the people talking to the master here, so sorry if I stutter a little bit. But anyways, I just wanted to respond to
If
the
it'll
last
make you feel any better, I stutter sometimes too when my thoughts are running too far ahead of my mouth. They get jammed up.
See, that's me every day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they said I'm ADD or something like that. I don't know. But anyway.
They probably would have said the same thing about me when I was in school, but I was in school way too long ago for that.
Yeah. Like I said, they say I got that, whatever. But anyways, I just wanted to call and respond to the last caller, and I've noticed, and as you can, I'm a younger fan. I've been watching your show since I was 18 years old, and going on 4 years now, and like I said, I've noticed a certain change. Like when I first got into it, even at 18, like I said, I was losing people left and right, like friends and everything, just because the way, I saw things. Like, come on, I was there at 9/11. Like, you can't, how the gas go up? You just ask all these questions and just, like, that's just what happened to me. I just asked too many questions. But anyways, the point what I'm trying to say is that, and I've noticed that a lot of people, they ask questions. They went to this question phase where I was, and they was afraid to speak out and afraid to say something. But now we're at the point to where that everybody's talking and everybody's angry, and we're ready to do something. That's great. I'm glad that everybody's at that point, but we do not need to make the mistake of making the violent mistake. What I mean is that we shouldn't.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
As you should preach. I don't want to say preach because, God, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
That's a farce too. Good Lord. Sorry.
No, but you're absolutely right. And, I know this protest they had over the weekend at the Alamo, which is actually historic because normally the policy at the Alamo is they do not allow the grounds to be used for political advocacy rallies, but in this case they did. And they're down there, and I had a problem with some of the rhetoric that we saw coming out of that protest about, come and take my guns, because that's obviously what the government wants to have happen. And the classic mistake that is made in wars and revolutions is trying to fight the war that the enemy is already prepared to fight and win. And obviously the most successful wars and revolutions are planned and fought outside the box, where you're coming very unconventionally and you rely on the rigid and established military structure of the enemy to prevent them from adapting to what you're doing. And that's just, basic strategy when you're thinking about these things. But violence is something this government wants, because that they know how to deal with, that they know how to respond to. They can declare a national emergency. And it's obvious the system is coming down all by itself, just like the old Soviet Union. So all we got to do is sit back, crack open a beer, get some popcorn, and just watch them make complete and utter fools of themselves.
And that's the point right there, is that if history teaches you over and over again, and like I said, I've been frantically for 4 years trying to get the 12 years of stuff they shoved in my mind, and then actually I went through a year of college, so I guess I still got some work to do. Anyways. But what I'm trying to say is, if you want, like I said, they want this. That's all they know. Here's what they don't know. And this is going to get, and if we keep talking about this, what I'm about ready to say, it's going to get you and probably me in trouble. Ideas. When it comes to solutions, when people get together and they start realizing they're getting ganged up on, they're going to start realizing they're going to have to protect themselves, and not firearms, but the mental state. They're going to have to learn how to be sophisticated in skills again. They're going to have to grow.
Yeah, the time to start pulling off the grid is right now. The whole grid, the whole society is set up to make you dependent on the Federal Reserve for your money, make you dependent on the giant food corporations to eat, make you dependent on some privately owned supply for water, because dependency means slavery. And, I know that sometimes the corporate media makes fun of the preppers, but they really do have the right idea. Now, I'm not saying everybody listening to this show ought to start digging in their basement to build a bunker, which we used to call a fallout shelter back when I was young, but having 2 to 3 months supply of food and storable food and water and first aid kits and extra medications, that's common sense. Whether we're dealing with an economic collapse or a tornado or a hurricane or a tsunami or anything, it is just common sense to be prepared to take care of yourself and your family for an extended period of time without support from the outside.
Also, I also want to add on to that and say that's very, like I said, that's very important, but I'm just saying, just even people just need to learn, like you said, computers, IT skills. Mm-hmm. Just learn something. Take a hobby and just pursue it. That is the main thing, and that's what people need to realize.
Yeah, can I insert a comment here? Because I saw an article about this the other day. College and college-level jobs got oversold in this country to the point where Americans, unfortunately, turn their noses up at the trades, which is, running pipes and plumbing, doing electrical wiring. Those are all essential things that we need to have as a society and as individuals. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing a trade if you are good at it and take pride in it. But if we treat plumbing and electrical work as somehow socially inferior, we're going to wind up with pipes that leak and electrical systems that short out. And that's just another change that we have to make in our culture. Yeah, we need college-educated people in certain functions, but we've got to respect the tradespeople who hold the whole thing together and keep it running.
Yes, and like I said, it's just people just, and I'm noticing all your viewers, and I'm talking to them right now, or I watch Bam User, so I'm a viewer.
Okay.
But listeners or viewers, all you guys out there, is that even though you're frustrated or angry, don't do something stupid, because there's even though you might not blog with a person about this, or you might not even see or even talk to this person, you will run into one of us, and you will know who us is. They're sophisticated individuals who understand to evolve in this life. You must know. You must gain knowledge.
Okay, we're going to have to cut you off. We're at a commercial break, and we're going to drop you here. But as we head into the commercial break here, remember, that smelly kid with the dynamite trying to talk you into blowing up a public building, he's an FBI or police undercover informant, and you should ignore him or her. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab some phone calls here. Dan in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. I've got two quick things for you. Number one is a report in the Indian media outlet NDTV that they've been having, they've had 150 ceasefire violations in the past 2 months between India and Pakistan. On Sunday, they had 8 pretty much simultaneous firefights along the India-Pakistan border. The big thing, though, is that a related article, they're considering asking the U.S. for intervention. And since they're both nuclear countries, I don't really think that's going to happen, but I haven't heard a peep about this at all in mainstream media, not on TV or radio.
Who is asking the U.S. for intervention?
India.
That's going to be that is a very interesting problem, because the U.S. is trying to maintain its relationship with Pakistan as a way of walling off other countries in the region. The U.S. is the reason you're not hearing it in the American corporate media is there's no way the U.S. is going to agree to India's request.
Well, I wouldn't think so. But you mentioned we just gave them another load of money, and I just thought I'd mention that. Apparently, they have been fighting for the past 2 months in fits and starts all along that border.
Well, that border, they've been fighting over that border for years, and it's escalating. There was an attempt to try and resolve the issue, I think, about 2 months ago, but apparently agent provocateurs got in there and started flinging things that go bang in random directions to get it back going again. Anything else?
Well, that brings you number two. You know, I've talked to you a few times about Senate Bill 462, and I've been doing research in the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And it's actually a very good act written back in 1938. It's a very broad brush. Covers media, government, all kinds of things. But there's one clause in there, section 613, paragraph E, in the exemptions section. And what it says is that any nation which the President of the United States, not the Congress, not the Secretary of State, if the President decides that that country in question is crucial to the defense of the USA, then none of the above applies. That is how Israel has gotten in the door with all of these blatantly illegal lobbying groups and news group ownership and government positions, because they have been declared to be vital to our nation's defense. And I think it's just the dirtiest of tricks.
Of course it is dirty. It's a dirty trick. The only reason Israel is vital to the United States, setting aside all the bribery and corruption and blackmail and everything going on, is that the United States needed to wag Israel at the Arab oil nations to keep them in the petrodollar deal. And that's, in that context, Israel is absolutely essential to the maintenance of the petrodollar deal. But it's already starting to fall apart and fizzle.
Well, that's what I understand. I understand the UAE and the Saudis now are perhaps taking a more prominent role. But I just wanted to pass that news on to you.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And, that whole foreign policy is definitely crumbling there. We're going to switch over to Obi in Colorado. Aloha, Obi. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just wanted to make an observation, and it seems like every time that there's a victory in the gun rights fight, you know, we did a recall here on a couple of senators, and then a few days later there was a mass shooting, or two of them.
Isn't that an amazing coincidence? I mean, it boggles the mind. When the Columbine happened, just days after a concealed carry law was passed. It's uncanny. It's almost too much of a coincidence to be believed.
Yeah, Nostradamus would be impressed. You know, and it happened. There was a big protest, you know, Saturday in Texas, and now we've got some more shootings going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, just my observation. That's all I got for you, and I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And apparently they're ramping up the booga booga, because along with the FBI warning that 4 cities in the Midwest are at risk of having their water supplies poisoned, apparently they had an incident at the Charlotte airport where a plane had to be isolated and evacuated because somebody found a note on the plane. It's been determined there's no real threat, but hey, they made the corporate media look, and everything's back to normal at Charlotte. We're going to go over to Patrick in Great Britain. Aloha, Patrick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Patrick, are you there? I know he's calling long distance.
Hello?
There you are.
Hello?
Yes. What's on your mind?
Yeah, gosh, you're popular today. Gosh,
yes.
Really. All these calls. Yeah, well, Great Britain, just first of all, it's a few things. Actually, at the moment, it is actually still quite mild. It's 60 to 65 degrees, pretty mild for mid-October, or getting towards the end of October. But we are dreading the winter with the third foreign-owned private corporation today, npower, having announced around a 10% increase just in time for winter. And, of course, it has been cold. I mean, as you know, we're an island, so we get whatever's blown at us. We can be extremely mild if we get a southwesterly coming in, the Atlantic drift. But if we get a northerly, it really takes a turn for the worse. So, yes, it may well be a harsh winter. And we've had wage freezes here. Some people on the local radio, they've had wage freezes for 5 years, literally, since 2008. Cost of living everywhere going up, and really... families under more of a squeeze than ever. Anyway,
okay. Yeah, I'm here. I was listening. You know, we're certainly seeing that here in the U.S. And here in Hawaii. The prices at the supermarkets are they're just exploding upward, and what you're buying is just a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller and a little bit more cheaply made, and it's a very, very bad trend. We're seeing protests all over the place against this imposed austerity. Major protests all across Italy, violent protests in Rome outside the finance ministry, Portugal, protests against austerity. And remember, they're misusing the word, because when you decide of your own free will to live a simpler lifestyle, that is austerity. When the government comes in and says you will live a simpler lifestyle so you can give us more of your money, that's dictatorship.
That's right. What I've mentioned is one of your pet subjects, and mine as well, of course, the lovely, fractional reserve banking around central banks, of course, and Mike Malone's very well put together, recently released episode 4 on the greatest scam that was unleashed on mankind, or something like that. What I think, it highlights a problem that we tend to overlook, and we tend to look at the central bank in itself as being the sole source of all the problem. But of course, apart from everyone watching the video, which I think you posted to whatreallyhappened.com, is we do well to remember that yes, during times of quantitative easing, of course, the bank steps in and prints, but of course, in normal operations, it's all the banks that operate as a kind of carousel around the central bank. They're actually creating all the money, and that Mike Malone's video really highlights that very well, with beautiful graphics and everything. See, over here we've got the Bank of England, which is meant to be now nationalised, so whether it hands back what it makes, we don't know. But all the money is, in a sense, actually created by all the banks that operate around that under their fractional reserve rule. Barclays, HSBC, Santander, Lloyds, TSB.
Yeah, they just create the money out of thin air, and they loan it at full face value plus interest. If anybody but these bankers were doing it, it would be called counterfeiting.
Interesting enough, that Mike Malone thinks, he actually, like you, he says that if we have, claim checks again or whatever, or a gold standard, we'll get scammed. But interesting what Mike Malone says, he actually wants a return to gold in itself as being the money.
Well, so that's the way the nation started. I have to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials, and I'll have some comments when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Patrick in Great Britain, obviously a public currency that is handled as a public utility is going to be better for the society and the nation as a whole than a public currency that is a privatized for-profit money-making opportunity for the bankers. And we know the bankers engage in scams no matter what monetary system is in use. And the idea when we're setting up the blueprint for the new America is to have a monetary system which is designed in such a way to minimize the effects of such scams, and to have a government that is on the side of the people and willing to prosecute bankers when they're caught engaging in fraud. And right now, the current government absolutely has gone over to the other side. It was established as a federal government policy back in 2008 that none of the players in the mortgage-backed security fraud were going to be investigated or charged or tried or jailed, and none of them have been. The federal government's solution to the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud was to take trillions of dollars away from the American people and give it to those bankers so they could loan that money back to the American people at interest. That's what all TARP and bailouts and everything come down to, taking your money and giving it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to you at interest. It's a wonderful deal for the bankers, and it's a terrible deal for the American people. I'm in favor of an asset-backed, value-based currency. I don't know that I would go with gold, because the human population is growing faster than the availability of gold, and that inevitably is going to create a shortage, which is a ripe target for hoarding and manipulation. I am still in favor of basing a new currency on a kilowatt hour of electricity, the electro, because power generation obviously will be growing, keeping pace with the growth of the human population. So it can't be hoarded. It can't be manipulated. It can't be monopolized the way silver and gold and tantalum and platinum can. Anyway, moving right along here, little interesting, weird story that came out. This is over at Ex Republic TV. Apparently, the U.S. federal government is still paying the interest on the $30 billion borrowed by Woodrow Wilson to pay for World War I, which is amazing because Germany, the nation that lost World War I, finished paying off their World War I debts a few years ago. Now, how does that come about where the nation that lost the war is now out of debt for that war, and you, the American people, citizens of the nation that helped to win World War I, are still on the hook to the bankers? Does that sound like sound fiscal management by the government to you? It certainly doesn't to me. Absolutely does not. Now, especially with all these shootings that are popping up just in time to revive the fortunes of the gun grabbers, a lot of people have been talking about the UN Arms Trade Treaty that was recently signed by John Kerry and wondering whether it would actually limit the Americans' people's ability to avail themselves of their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, to protect their homes from criminals at a time when the police are not doing the job, and to hold off encroachment of tyranny. And it turns out that this treaty may already be headed for the scrap pile, because apparently a bipartisan group of 50 senators have already announced they will not vote to ratify this treaty because it might limit the ability of Israel to acquire new weapons from the United States of America. So, right action, questionable motive, but apparently that treaty is not going to be ratified. Now remember, treaties go through a two-step process. Somebody signs it, Secretary of State, the President, to great media fanfare, but it's not the law of the land until it is ratified by Congress. And now we're getting word that because this might limit Israel's ability to buy weapons from the United States, that it may be dead on arrival. We're going to take a phone call here. Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. That blows my mind about what you said about Wilson's debt we're still paying on.
Yep.
I can tell you what, as far as why Germany paid their loan off before we did, because Germany rebuilt Germany with the help of the United States. We ended up rebuilding all of Europe almost. No wonder we're still in debt.
Well, we rebuilt Europe in order to rebuild markets for American products, and there's no question that the United States corporations reaped a huge profit from those rebuilt nations coming to the United States, especially post-World War II, where the United States was the only nation that had not had its industrial base bombed into rubble. So everybody had to come to the United States for machine tools and ball bearings and all kinds of stuff. And between that and Bretton Woods getting a piece of the action of all global commerce, it was a golden time for the American society.
Well, Mike, I agree with all that, but now that the Ponzi scheme is over, we've ruined it. Whatever advantage we had by having the world's currency, we've blown it with this 2008 financial collapse. And I don't know why we're still, I'm surprised that the economy's still going. I thought it was going to end in 2009 by the latest.
I don't think it is going. I mean, when they're having to literally print up all this instant money every month, that's not a sign of an economy that's actually able to function. That's an economy on life support. They've got an IV line plugged into the arm of the banks, just pumping that money in there to keep them going.
Well, Michael, what I don't understand is how people buy this idea that, oh, the stock market's doing great, the housing market's doing great. Of course they're doing great because we're inflating the currency. The prices are inflating because we're printing currency like crazy. It's not real economic
Well, they're saying the stock market and housing market shows the healthy economy because that's what the corporate media is telling them. But if you were to take the sky-high Dow stock market numbers and adjust for inflation, you'd realize the stock market's been in a major decline over the last several years. The housing boom is mostly cash buyers who are coming in to buy up these properties in order to turn them into rental properties. It doesn't represent ordinary working and middle-class Americans able to now afford a new home.
And what they're not telling us is who these buyers are, because a lot of them are from overseas. They're not Americans.
Absolutely.
A lot of them are commercial properties that have big dollar values, so that helps boost the average. And it's just false. It's false information. I mean, we are basically living in North Korea right now, with the only difference being that they're propagandizing Madoff capitalism. At least in North Korea, they're not selling you on Jim Cramer-style investments. They're not telling you the truth. But at least they're not selling you on that garbage.
Well, there are good and bad aspects to every country on earth, and I think the first lesson Americans need to realize is that our system and our government are pretty much equal in terms of no better and no worse than other nations, although clearly things are getting worse in this country. But the recognition that all that we've been told about how great this nation is really was a lie and a fraud. And again, I keep going back to that wonderful clip from HBO's The Newsroom, where our protagonist gets up there and says the first step in solving a problem is recognizing there is one, and America is not the greatest nation on earth. And it hasn't been for quite some time. Back in the 1960s, it was easy to believe. We were going to the moon. We were doing all these amazing technological accomplishments. We did have a good, solid economy right up to the first part of the Reagan presidency. We were the world's largest creditor nation. 12 years later, after 2 terms of Reagan and 1 of Bush Sr., we were the world's largest debtor nation. And that really did start this process of decline, which accelerated with Wall Street's predations and that 2008 debacle.
And the fundamentals, we've lost the fundamentals, and Ross Perot was right about opening up our trade with the rest of the world and doing it in such a sloppy fashion. It hasn't helped us. I don't think overall it's going to help the rest of the world the way we did it. And we're eventually going to have to pay the piper. There's no escaping it.
Oh, yeah, there's absolutely no question now. And Ross Perot was right in the context of going back to those post-World War II years where business was booming all over this country and new companies were being started. They couldn't find managers. They didn't want to promote the people from the floor to be managers because then they couldn't find replacements for the people who actually knew how to make the products. So Harvard Business School came up with the concept of scientific business management, a standardized set of rules that would apply to all companies, and they created a degree program to go along with it, the Masters of Business Administration, the MBA. And the idea was that these schools could crank out MBAs who, in theory, could manage any company no matter what it did. So you'd have an MBA was working at a company that made rearview mirrors 1 month, and then next month he was in a company making donuts, and the month after that he was in a company manufacturing pharmaceuticals, and it sounded good on paper. But it actually led to a decline in the quality of American manufactured projects, and worse, it created a generation of corporate managers with absolutely no love or respect for the manufacturing process. So when they moved into top corporate leadership, the first thing they did was start shipping the manufacturing off to other countries. Instead of inventing new products and manufacturing them for sale, we started inventing new products and licensing them off to other countries to manufacture and then sell back to us. What an absolute disaster that turned out to be. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And an interesting story. The United States is now warning the government of Uganda of an imminent terrorist attack by Al-Shabaab. This is the new Orwellian Emmanuel Goldstein-esque villain that is being wagged at the world because too many people have come to understand that Al-Qaeda in Arabic slang means a toilet, which sort of undermines its credibility as a terror threat. Hi, we're here from the toilet. We're going to blow up your building. And everybody starts going, and Jeff Dunham and Ahmed come in and say, silence, I kill you. Now, of course, why Uganda? Well, there's a lot of oil there. And right now, Uganda is selling most of it to China. And they're not asking for U.S. dollars for it. So we can just expect that the United States, in order to deal with the terror threat, will now be garrisoning Uganda. They're trying to conquer Africa piecemeal. It's the new Africa Corps. I'm sorry, AFRICOM. Going to grab a phone call here. Taylor in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Taylor, are you there?
Hello?
There you go. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Okay, the name's Gear, not Taylor, but anyway, yeah, what I wanted to point out, we're talking about, our economic situation, and I think pretty much everybody listening knows that we didn't get here by mistake. It's all been by design. And I put together a flyer I've been putting together and massaging over decades, but I had a quote out of Youth Action News back that I've been using for decades, and this is out of Trilateral Report number 23, in 1982, and it says, actions at the multinational level will be needed if the process of international relocation of industries is to be accelerated in organized fashion. So this was right coming out of the Trilateral Commission back in the 80s, and we know how they deindustrialized us. They took our machinery, shipped it to Red China. I worked at
okay, I need to cut in here a little bit because
sure.
I think the comment by the Trilateral Commission wasn't necessarily a blueprint, but an attempt to forestall what's going on. I don't think anybody in Wall Street that is alive right now intends to crash the economy, because that's going to crash their own personal fortunes. The problem is they can't stop it, because they inherited this monetary system with a built-in self-destruct, which is that by design 100 years ago, it creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt, until finally servicing that debt is using up so much of the gross domestic product that there's nothing left over with which to actually operate commerce. And I think that's where we are right now. So we're seeing all these organizations who are trying, without actually questioning the prime assumption of the Federal Reserve model, trying to figure out some way they can forestall and hold off the inevitable disastrous consequences, and I think they're running out of ideas at this point.
Okay, are you going to cut me off or let me add to this?
Well, you can add one more thing to it.
Okay, well, this was a report by the Trilateral Commission, formed in the 70s. Jimmy Carter was a founding member, put together by Brzezinski for David Rockefeller. So this was an organization that kind of a sister to the Council on Foreign Relations. And the statement just exactly tells us what they did, because they've been trying to deindustrialize us. The whole thing was to get slave labor to bring products in here duty-free and break us. And that's what they've done.
The moving of manufacturing to other countries was done for purely cost-cutting reasons. And again, part of the problem was that we evolved because of the MBA program during the post-World War II years. We evolved a generation of corporate managers with no sympathy for, identification with, or respect or love for the process of actually making products. They considered it beneath their dignity. They didn't want to get their hands dirty. So looking at the balance sheets, they simply moved the manufacturing to other countries. And don't forget, back in 2008, the Bush administration actually gave tax incentives to large American corporations that encouraged the offshoring of jobs. And that process actually accelerated under the Obama administration. Now, those who are pushing for a global government and a global economy are trying to regionalize the nation, or rather regionalize the globe, where manufacturing is all over here, and agriculture is all over there, and pharmaceuticals is up here, and clothing manufacturing is down here, and cars down here, because when they do that, then they can sit astride those lines of communication that are moving these products across the globe. They can sit in as middlemen, and they can charge a premium or an uplift on these products coming in from the other side of the globe, which they would not be able to extract if local communities had local manufacturing, local agricultural, to basically meet the needs of the society just by going down with a direct link between the producers and the consumers. And a huge part of the global economy is based on the idea of enforced middlemen, where somebody makes a product in China and it goes through 5 or 6 different hands before you can buy it at the store, with those 5 or 6 hands getting a piece of the action without actually contributing anything of value to that product at all. And it was that process that basically has resulted in so much of our manufacturing leaving the country. Plus, there's regulatory compliance, which is a major headache in this country. Much of it is gratuitous in order to justify politicians' salaries. We'll come up with a new rule saying we must have stickers on the ladders that both feet must be on the ground, like we don't already know that. There's the tax burden that is imposed on workers. And the reason you can go to other countries and have lower manufacturing costs is the cost for the workers is lower because they're paying less taxes. And they actually do have good lifestyles over there, even though on paper they're much poorer than the American people. And it's just this confluence of overlapping agendas that are going on there. Now, I understand the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and the United Nations are all pushing this idea of a global government and a global financial system based on debt-based currencies borrowed at interest from that private bank. But I don't think they're calling the shots as much as you might think. And I reject this idea that there is some master conspiracy out there in the hinterland for 2 reasons. One, Everybody's working for their own immediate agenda. Nobody's pledging allegiance to some Illuminati master, but the corporate media would like you to think that, because then you're thinking, oh, this is happening in Europe, it's happening in Washington, D.C., and you then are blinded to seeing that what is going wrong with this country is happening right on your main street in that financial institution, which is creating money out of thin air and loaning it at full face value plus interest in order to keep you slaves to debt. Thank you for the call, Taylor. We're going to let you go at this point. And I want to head up to the top of the hour by reprising something we mentioned earlier. The FBI has come out with our daily dose of booga booga, saying that at least 4 major cities in the Midwest face a terror threat that may cause potential harm in the next 30 days. So somebody somewhere is already planning the next false flag terror attack. Oh my goodness, there's anthrax in the water, there's Ebola, there's Kool-Aid with real sugar in it or something like that, and it's those gosh darn Syrian, Iranian, Russian, Chinese, whatever. And again, having a supply of water on your premises is not a bad idea. But the advantage of this particular thing, where it's going to happen in multiple cities, makes the terror threat feel more immediate. See, if they just knock over another skyscraper in New York, that's a horrible tragedy and traumatic for people in New York. But if you're west of the Mississippi, it's something that's happening far away. And obviously, if they're planning a new false flag to launch more wars and everything, it's got to be something that way beyond jetliners into tall buildings, because that's now passé. Been there, done that, didn't buy the T-shirt. So they're going to have to do something that is just overwhelmingly shocking and scary, and it could be hitting you this very second to magnify the terror attack. But again, common sense. Look for what should be there and isn't. What would be the motive for Iran or Syria or Russia or China to dump poison in the water supply of American cities? And the answer is none. These people are trying to prevent the escalation of World War III. The only one with a motive is the U.S. and or Israel that is trying to revive the war agenda and ready to just booga-booga you into going along with it. All right, we're going to hit the top of the hour. We're going to have a Phyllis Shapley and some commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show for hour number 3. And I want to talk about the paranoia that is emanating from the White House, certainly Washington, D.C. as a whole, with regards to not only the independent media, but even now the corporate media, where anytime the corporate media reveals something that is embarrassing to the government, they shout, "Traitor! Traitor!" They're publishing embarrassing materials, forgetting that this nation was founded on the principle that the government is always, without exception, answerable to we the people. And the reason the corporate media, the press, were given the protections of the First Amendment is so that they could serve as a watchdog on government abuse and stand up and say where the government was wrong, in violation of the law, in violation of common sense and morality, and be able to speak it publicly without fear of reprisal. Now, there's an interesting article over at 12160 pointing out that Obama's efforts to control the corporate media, and by extension the independent media, are the most aggressive of any administration since Richard Nixon. So, anyway. Now, based on more of Edward Snowden's leaks, France is extremely upset. Apparently, the NSA has been doing spies numbers on their phone calls, listening to business phone calls over there. And it has nothing to do with terror, looting business secrets, listening to private phone calls. And the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, has now summoned the U.S. ambassador to officially express France's disapproval that the U.S. has spied on millions of phone calls in France. And the NSA has now been busted for conducting what amounts to industrial espionage, not only in France, but Mexico, Brazil, China, all around the world. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Edward Snowden's leaks are far more substantive than anything that came out of WikiLeaks. Where's his movie? Let's do a movie about Edward Snowden. Snowden deserves a movie. Far more than Julian Assange, who is on record as saying that he opposed the 9/11 truth movement. Now, this was actually reported last September, but I'm going to mention it now. There is another study being undertaken on debris that was salvaged from the remains of the World Trade Center back in 2001 that is going to try and reconfirm the presence of nanothermite. This appears to be a weaponized thermite, ultrafine particles of aluminum and iron oxide that burn extremely hot and are used in cutter charges to melt metal. We've seen the videos of the very suspicious white smoke clouds that were just pouring out of the building just before it collapsed. So then go back and look at that again. And remember that building number 7 just collapsed into its own footprint, had not been hit by an airplane, had a few fires and a few windows, was not fully involved, and it just came crashing right on down. All right, we're going to grab a quick phone call here from Mr. X. I'm already suspicious. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm calling from Area 51.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, you can tell the government furlough is over. The paid shills to kookify the set, kookify the show are already on the line here. I have a theory about Area 51 and why all of a sudden it's in the media. Because remember, when it was first built, that whole facility was built. It was all ultra top secret. Nobody knew about it until the Russians published one of their satellite pictures showing it was there. And then all of a sudden, Area 51, it's all over the Discovery Channel, it's all over the national, oh, Area 51, there's strange things going on now out there. So I went out to Google Earth and I took a look at the place in a recent photo. And the big, long runway that reaches across the dry lake, it's all cracked up and it's marked with X's, which if you are a licensed pilot, you understand means the runway is closed and may not be used. And I think from that evidence, more than likely, that Black Project aircraft development has been moved to a new location. And the media is pushing Area 51, and the hired shills are pushing Area 51 so that people are going out to Nevada and camping out there, hoping to see America's latest R&D, not realizing that it's been set up as bait. It's a decoy. Area 51, and I know there's work still going on there of a minor nature, to judge by how few aircraft and other things seem to be there looking through Google Earth. But I think it's primarily a decoy to get everybody looking over in Nevada, and the Black Project aircraft development has moved someplace else, possibly out of the country. North of Scotland, somewhere in the Australian outback, so forth and so on. Now then, speaking of cover-ups and deceptions, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I've gone back into the articles that I wrote about this a long, long time ago, and I've started to revamp them and repost them to the front of whatreallyhappened.com, and you may want to go in and take a look, because one of the ones that I did had to do with the December 14th, 1963 issue of Post magazine. It was just a couple of weeks after the assassination, and I kept that magazine throughout the years, because when it happened, I bought the official story. Lee Oswald, crazed lone nut, no need to think about it anymore. But I kept a lot of the materials. I sort of have the instincts of an archivist or a pack rat, depending upon who you ask. And I kept the magazine. And when Jim Garrison brought his trial against Clay Shaw, who was later on admitted by Richard Secord to have been a CIA contract agent, I went back and I looked at the magazine, and there were two things that leapt out at me. And one was a photograph that supposedly showed the view from the assassin's nest. And it's this low, flat image of a car with two people in it, front seat, back seat, that makes it look possible that, yes, one bullet could have hit both Kennedy and Connally. Except that the photo's an obvious fake, because the very distinctive brickwork of the Texas School Book Depository is clearly visible in the frame to the right. So this photo was actually shot from the Daltex building. And if you look at photos, and they're included in the article, of what it looks like from the so-called sniper's nest on the 6th floor, it's obviously not the same view. So even back then, Post magazine was out there just selling you this lie about the crazed lone nut killer. And the other picture that was in there had to do with, was a shot by James Altkins from down the road looking back at the Kennedy motorcade, and he snapped the shutter just as Kennedy grabbed his throat. And it was a 2-page spread of the photo, and for the longest time after that, the photo was never reprinted, but I just recently found a high-resolution copy of the original image without going through a halftone, and I've added it to the page. And there's a couple of things very obvious in there. First of all, you can see standing in the ground-level doorway of the book depository Lee Harvey Oswald just looking out at the commotion. Now remember, when the cops ran into the building, they found Oswald in the ground floor lunchroom having a Coke. And in the photo, he's clearly wearing the same clothes that he's seen wearing in the photos following his arrest at the Texas Theater. Now, the supporters of the official legend have tried to claim that the man in the doorway is actually another guy named Billy Lovelady, but in photos of the real Billy Lovelady taken at Dealey Plaza, he's wearing a completely different outfit. This very large red and blue plaid outfit, which is obviously not what the man in the school book depository is wearing. But there's other things you need to look at. One of the Secret Service agents in the car following John F. Kennedy's limousine is grinning ear to ear, and yet you can tell from Kennedy's Secret Service detail when they're looking to the rear, they've heard the gunshots. And what's really obvious is they're not moving. Meanwhile, 2 cars back, you've got the Secret Service detail protecting the Vice President, Lyndon Johnson, and you can see their car doors are open. They're on the move to protect the Vice President. Now, some of the versions of the photo, like the one in Mortal Error, are cropped, so you can't see Johnson's Secret Service protective detail on the move. But that alone tells us there's something funny going on with this assassination. We're going to be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you're probably already aware, during his campaigns of 2008 and 2012, Oprah Winfrey was a major supporter, booster for Barack Obama. And she carries a lot of clout because of how many people watch her show and watch her channel. But apparently the latest word is that she has now basically jumped ship, at least with regards to Obamacare, and does not want to get her name tangled up with that, which means that a lot of these celebrities who just, oh, I've been invited to the White House, what a thrilling time in my career, and they went up there and said, oh, yes, well, they're realizing that hitching themselves to this train wreck is actually going to harm their career, and they're starting to back off. Now let's talk about the NSA for a little bit. They've come under a huge amount of criticism for behaving illegally, unconstitutionally, and rudely, and now it's come out that the NSA is a major player in the drawing up of the so-called Obama death lists, which are the people that are supposed to be killed by the drone strikes, not the other 40, 50 innocent bystanders around there, but the one they're actually aiming at as a terror suspect, without a trial, without presentation of proof to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Oh, we think he's a terrorist, go kill him. It has now come out, and this is a story that we're seeing over at Ex-Republic TV, that the NSA has been using email address books and contact lists to try and determine who's a terror suspect through that whole 6 degree of separation situation. And the reason this is very alarming is because I don't know much about my friend's friends, let alone my friend's friend's friends. There could be a connection of only 3 degrees of separation to somebody who's doing something really icky, and I don't know anything about it, let alone participate. Plus, when I read this story, I just took a quick wander through my contact list, and there are names in there from years ago, decades ago. I don't throw these things out. People I knew back in the film industry, people I knew back at NASA, I haven't talked to them in years. Some of them could even be dead. I don't know. So we have another example of this NSA grab-it-all philosophy relying on what is going to be a very inaccurate and unreliable source of raw intelligence with which to make decisions on who to kill. It's an extraordinarily reckless approach to solving what really amounts to a non-existent problem. Apparently, Dianne Feinstein has made so much noise about NSA that it's starting to attract some negative attention. And over at Tech Dirt, they're saying this could result in NSA surveillance being declared unconstitutional. Now, we don't need anybody to declare it. We know it's unconstitutional. It is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. And there are attempts to get this before the United States Supreme Court. Of course, we know the United States Supreme Court is already compromised because of that sudden 11th hour 180-degree about-face by Chief Justice Roberts with regard to Obamacare. It's another example of a policy that was ramrodded through. The people of the United States of America are very much opposed to, and Washington, D.C. doesn't really know what to do. And again, the indications are Washington, D.C. is really out of touch with what's going on out here in the United States. Now, I know they monitor my website and they're listening to my radio show, but again, that email reply I got from Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono just made it clear that whoever is handling her email had not even read my commentary, because I had emailed her my rationale for dismissing the claim that Assad gassed his own people as an obvious piece of war propaganda. And I got a reply back that did not address anything that was in my original email and maintained the position that we view with alarm that Assad is gassing his own people. I guess senators don't listen to anybody who doesn't have a $100,000 campaign contribution check in their hand. But this being this far out of touch with what the people are really thinking in this country amplifies the possibility of a major, major mistake. Yes, we can do a false flag. They'll believe it. They always have. Or some other such nonsense. Another scandal brewing. Apparently, 60 Minutes had a very good segment on their last show showing that members of Congress are routinely using campaign committees as personal slush funds. In other words, these campaign committees are bringing in campaign donations, and the money is not being spent on the campaign, that the member of Congress will simply go in, grab some of that money, and use it for going out on vacations, expensive golf trips, claim that they're writing it off as campaign building, but apparently it's a huge, huge problem out there. Another scandal coming out of the United States Senate. Apparently the Senate has a report confirming that the CIA was evading oversight of their torture programs. And the Senate is refusing to release it. Now remember, when we were talking about the problem with prescription antidepressants leading to violence and suicide, Congress did hold hearings. And they chose to do nothing about it and not release any information because Big Pharma are huge campaign contributors. And now we have this other situation where the Senate is apparently helping the CIA conceal from the American people the fact that the U.S. government is engaging of torture. And torture does not get you accurate, reliable intelligence. It gets you whatever the torturer wants to hear. The only thing that you get from torture are politically expedient confessions, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who confessed to being the mastermind of 9/11 after only being waterboarded 137 times. And I'll tell you right now, if you were waterboarded 137 times, they could get you to confess to personally nailing Jesus to the cross, shooting down the Hindenburg, the Challenger in Colombia, and assassinating Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. That's what torture is used for, to get a confession, whether it was the Inquisition or the Nazis and now the United States of America. Meanwhile, speaking of the Boston bombing, that's beginning to come into the news again because the Senate is now asking the FBI for more information about just what they knew about the Tsarnaev brothers and when they knew it. Because remember, when that whole false flag, phony bombing thing was coming down, the FBI announced on the corporate media that they had all the emails and phone traffic for the Tsarnaev brothers for months ahead of when the incident happened. Which immediately begged the question, if you had all that information, why didn't you stop the bombing? And of course, with the killing of Todashev Ibrahim down in Florida, apparently in response to their failure to coerce him into signing a confession that would have so demonized the Tsarnaevs, people would have stopped asking these questions. It's time for Congress to look into it. Probably won't get anywhere. So let's talk about Hillary Clinton, because it is very obvious she is angling for the nomination in 2016. In fact, earlier today, Fox News was running a story about, is she a foregone conclusion as the Democratic candidate for 2016? I'm sure Joe Biden would have a different opinion, but there's no question that she's aiming for that. She wants to be the first female president of the United States of America. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And opposition to her is already growing from a wide variety of quarters, including yours truly. And there's a wonderful little video that has been put out, and that Hillary has called in some favors to make sure that it does not see the American corporate media or even movie theaters. And it's on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and you really ought to take a look at that. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phones here. Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I want to talk about Obamacare. We'll just stick with that. I've been doing research, reading Linus Pauling and all that on vitamin C, and when I was 19, I started taking, in the grams, several grams a day of vitamin C, and I have only had 3 doctors, when I tell them how much I take, nod their head with approval. With a smile on their face, they said, there you go. There's a video out. It's from New Zealand on 60 Minutes. This poor guy, they were going to take him off life support, and his family demanded that he be put on high doses of intravenous vitamin C, and they threatened legal action, and they were going to turn off the machine that Friday, and 3 months later, he walked out, and he's living, and he not only got cured of his the swine flu, but the leukemia he had. So when I have friends, who said, well, the government's trying to do good here, and I sit there and I tell them, I go, with the mercury in the flu shots, the GMO, and all these prescriptions that are killing people more than drugs, illicit drugs. What makes you think your government wants you to be well?
It's all about the money. I mean, if the American people were 100% healthy, this entire medical industrial complex would collapse, and with it, all the tax revenues the government collects from it. Both that medical industrial complex and the government actually need the American people to be chronically ill. And not that it's a conscious decision, let's go make them sick so we can sell them the cure, but all along the way, decisions are often made with an eye toward profitability versus what's really best for the people. And we know there's all kinds of things people can do for themselves that are going to avoid large numbers of these medical problems that we tend to get. Keeping your diet slightly alkali, you can avoid bursitis and gout. And without having to go to costly medications. And it's kind of interesting you would bring this up. First of all, as we reported earlier, right now in this country, roughly 400,000 Americans are killed every year by mistakes made by their doctors, hospitals, and pharmacies. If this government were really concerned about your health, they would be looking into that scandal. They'd be looking into the SSRIs. They'd be looking into the highly toxic adjuvants being put into vaccines. They'd be doing something about the demonstrated link between prescription antidepressants and violence and suicide. But no, those are all making money. So we don't want you to be able to cure your own illnesses with things you can grow in your garden. You have to go to a store and buy something that's been through their factories that they get a markup on. And it's funny you would bring this up because there's a story over at Natural News where this prominent heart surgeon, Dr. Lundell, has gone on to basically say what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that this idea of cholesterol being the cause of heart disease hasn't panned out, and that in point of fact, the recommendations of dealing with cholesterol, including all these medications, have actually made Americans' health worse with epidemics of obesity and diabetes. These statin drugs are turning out to actually be high risk because as the statins flake the plaque off your arteries, it comes off in large chunks that can wedge themselves in very important little tiny openings in the brain and the heart. But your brain
needs cholesterol.
To an extent, it needs some of it, yeah. And what they're realizing is the plaque is not the cause, it is a symptom. And if you're going to remove the plaque, it's got to be done gradually over time, just dissolved, not just pried off with the, in huge chunks by the medications. We have this other situation where the CDC has admitted 98 million Americans received a polio vaccine contaminated with cancer virus. It's just all driven by the money, and we've got the most expensive health care on earth, and it's something like 33rd in terms of its quality and efficacy, and it's all driven by the money.
Now, I was listening to your interview with McAfee, very interesting character. I've been watching his videos. But let me make this clear. Let me make this straight, because I think he's done it. I think he posted it, but I don't think he really made it clear in your interview. As it is now, the way they got the coding, say you and I, with a little bit of homework, we could put up an exchange, a very professional, competitive-looking exchange, okay, and we could hack into it, and people could think through Obamacare they're coming on to a legitimate exchange, and they're getting Obamacare, when in fact, me and you, we're heading to Hawaii for, not Hawaii, but somewhere else.
I'm going to Cleveland. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he was saying that on ABC News even. The scammers are already out there. They're calling people's homes and saying, I'm an Obamacare navigator. I'm here to walk you through the process. You tell me the information and I will type it in and get your insurance. And, of course, they're just, identity thieves. It's wide open. This was a cash grab. Their top priority is get the money out of the American people. The health impacts are secondary, and security for the American people is not even in the code. It's wide open to fraud. This government is just, their total focus is on taking more from you so they can keep this little pyramid scheme monetary policy going for another few weeks, or at least until somebody else is in office, and it's failing miserably.
Can I add some? You mentioned Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that they had to torture him 160 some odd times, and I wanted to add to that. He's even tougher than that. I believe it came out in Raw Story. They actually tortured his children. They put him in boxes with biting bugs in it. And made him watch it.
They did. They did that. That's an old CIA trick. They used to use that down in Chile when they overthrew the elected government of Salvador Allende, and they put in the dictator Pinochet, and anybody who spoke out against Pinochet, they would grab them, they'd put them in a cage and watch while their children were being tortured. This was being done by the CIA. Nice bunch of and then you wonder why these countries hate our guts. They hate us for our freedoms. They hate us because we have Big Macs. They hate us because we have swell television shows. Not anymore.
It fits very well. It runs very parallel that the commander of Auschwitz, as it turned out now, his was the only testimony at Nuremberg of the supposed Holocaust, and his confession was after he had been tortured by British intelligence.
Oh yeah, they beat him to a pulp for like several days running. But he left a clue in it because he was talking about all the horrible things that happened at Camp Walzak, and it turned out there never was a Camp Walzak. So even there he was sending a message. The confession that he signed was written in English, and Rudolf Haas did not read, write, or speak English. So he signed a confession he couldn't even read.
Right. And you was right about Julia Assad, because now they're coming out with Hail Hillary movies about him, and he never really did come out with anything that following your website ever came out with. Mm-hmm. And he gets praised, and you get blacklisted.
Go figure.
Yeah. I like your trailer, False Flag.
A lot of.
Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
Yes, I wear my blacklisting with pride. Do you hear? All righty, moving right along here. Speaking of TV, the producers of Face Off, which is just this gratuitous making people up to look like monsters and stuff, have come out with a new show involving body painting totally naked people. So this is a chance to see completely naked people on TV, except they're covered in body paint. And it's already sparked, apparently, at least one look-alike show called, I think it's Naked Las Vegas. I'm not actually watching these things. But it just absolutely shows what an absolute cultural wasteland American television has become. There are exceptions. A lot of the stuff coming out of HBO. I'm hooked on the network. The newsroom. Can't wait for the new season to start. I didn't get into Breaking Bad when it was on the air, but when they were coming up on the final episode, I started looking at the episodes and said, that wasn't bad at all. That was actually pretty good. Interesting comment from the creator of Breaking Bad, talking about the issue of online piracy. He says that the illegal downloading actually made his show more popular and more profitable because it built public awareness. And I think a lot of people are coming to understand that this attempt to blame piracy for the declining fortunes in Hollywood really is just scapegoating them. And I'm not saying that piracy is okay, but this idea that all of their declining in fortunes had to do with piracy is nonsense. They're making bad decisions. They're just looking for somebody to blame. Got to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, if you are a veteran and the VA is your primary care provider, you are exempt from Obamacare. You don't have to sign up. And by the way, getting back to the coding problems with this and using all this JavaScript to dump the work onto the end user's computers, and that's all well and good, but do you realize how many people have JavaScript blocked on their browsers because it is a known security threat? And that may account for one of the reasons why so few people could get in and get the thing to work. And again, it shows that nobody really had a well-thought-out architecture for this system going in. They just say, we'll grab this and this and this and glue them together. It'll be wonderful. It'll be great. No, it isn't. Obama is out there promising he will fix the Obamacare registration system, saying the law is great. There are glitches on the computer. I vow I will fix them. I can just see Obama there in the Oval Office with Programming for Dummies open on the desk in front of him here. Up in Washington State, bit of a scandal going on there. Nearly 24 women have claimed that they were forced to strip naked in a Washington police station while being recorded and watched by male jailers. Not just one or two. Apparently this happened, and apparently they've had additional complaints from dozens of other people in the Puyallup City Jail, and they're trying to work through that. Now, the police and the jailers are defending this, saying it's common industry standard. No, it isn't. The common industry standard is if a woman has to be strip searched, it's done by another woman. And don't just make her undress in a room full of guys with cameras and camcorders. Just a reminder of how this whole so-called law enforcement system has gone completely out of control. Meanwhile, over in New York, like they don't have enough problems with their police behavior over there, they arrested a guy, let me see if I get this last name correctly, Olantujiho, 25-year-old, was arrested and held for 24 hours because police found a little tiny bag of what looked like blue crystalline rocks of solid material. They said, it's crystal meth. We're arresting him. We're throwing him in jail. Turned out it was Jolly Rancher candy. And they threw this guy in this hoosegow for 24 hours. Just amazing here. Meanwhile, this is a story coming out of 12160. There's been another major dragnet for child porn. We're going to end the scourge of child porn. And don't get me wrong, I think child porn is a little sick. Pedophilia is a little sick. But apparently, this dragnet got 90 police officers, hundreds of child welfare professionals, care workers, and teachers. Now, I don't understand what's going on with this. But I don't think they got the people they were thinking of getting. Or maybe this is just a way to silence people. Plant child porn on their computers, send the cops after them. Oh, they had child porn. You don't want to listen to them when they talk about 9/11 and Vincent Foster and Hillary Clinton. And by the way, many years ago, there was somebody up in Canada who was trying to break into my machine and plant child porn. And my understanding is the guy got caught doing it to another computer in Canada, which takes child porn very seriously, and they locked him up. But this is a very, very common trick. In fact, I think there was another blog about a month and a half, 2 months ago. They were trying to break into his machine and plant child porn on it so that they could prosecute him. Or at least demonize him in the media, because if your machine shows signs of being hacked, then obviously they can't actually prove that you individually put the child porn on there. There's no chain of evidence there. Apparently up in British Columbia, because of more police violence there, there's a renewed call for police officers to wear video cameras. And it has to do with the death of former Canadian peacekeeper Greg Matters, where he was shot in the back by a heavily armed member of the RCMP, sent to arrest him on a charge of assaulting his brother. Now, the inquest was supposed to take a week, then stretched into 2, and now it's been put off till January, which tells you something went really bad. Now, Matters was being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you think he was on SSRIs? Probably. But I'm in agreement that police officers and citizens should have wearable cameras to document what goes down in these times of rampant, out-of-control police brutality. And in the case of the police officers, there should be stiff penalties if the resulting videos get lost, because we've been seeing this already with those dash cam videos. If it doesn't support the police officer's version of what happened, the dash cam video is corrupted, or it's lost, or, hey, we just don't know where it went. Alrighty, we're coming up on the top of the show, and I will leave the rest of this stuff here until tomorrow. I want to go back and talk about the economy, because this debt ceiling deal did not solve anything. They just put the problem off till next year so we can all have a serene and calm and happy Christmas holiday shopping season, which I think is going to be another disaster for the retailers. And it gives us a few more months to get a question out there before the eyes of the American people. And we need to get this question out there. Why are we talking about a debt ceiling? The Constitution gives the federal government the authority to create and issue a debt-free public currency, to spend it into circulation to buy what the government needs. It flows through circulation without accruing any interest, and is taxed back in the same amount at the end of the cycle to balance the books. That's how this nation started, and it worked really well. That's why the bankers hate it so much. And they've worked unceasingly for over 200 years to somehow get rid of it, and they succeeded 100 years ago. But if the Constitution gives the U.S. government the authority to create and issue debt-free public currency, why does this government persist on borrowing that currency at interest from a privately owned central bank? That is the question every single American ought to be asking right now. Corporate media will never ask that question. The government lives in dread fear that Americans will start asking that question, because they don't have an answer for it. The only answer is, the bankers bought the Congress and the president 100 years ago. To enslave you to unpayable levels of debt, because this system always creates more debt than money to pay that debt. They could liquidate the entire country, sell your wives and children for medical experiments, and they still could not pay off all the debt that has been created with this little Ponzi scheme banking system. So between now and the start of next year, when this whole debt crisis problem rears its head again, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to talk to all your friends, co-workers, co-students, family, people at the store, people at the park, and just say, the Constitution gives the federal government the authority to create and issue debt-free public currency. Why is this government borrowing that currency at interest from a privately owned bank, condemning future generations of Americans to be debt slaves? to be serfs, to be indentured servants, to be slaves, whatever word you want to call for, because those future generations who are going to be told that they owe a share of some quadrillion dollars in accumulated debt that they are going to have to pay over their life with their work, they didn't vote it in. They didn't get to say yes or no. When you go up to somebody and say, you will give me this much of your work product without argument, that is slavery. And that is not what the United States is supposed to be. Not at all. Righty, let's see. Oh, and down here in Hawaii, the Big Island has banned GMOs. There's a huge fight coming up here on Oahu over all these experimental test fields where they're growing non-approved GMO crops here on Oahu. I guess they figure if something crawls out of the field and starts eating cars driving by on the highway, well, it's just Hawaii and we can write that off. But more and more people are standing up to GMOs. There's political corruption. Apparently, the campaign against GMO labeling has been caught laundering money from major supermarket chains and food providers. All of it illegal. That may blow up in their face. There's the music. Time for Claire and I to go on out and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And again, for those of you who have not donated, go over to republicbroadcasting.org, hit that little donate button. We don't get big checks from Monsanto or Dow Chemical or any of those corporations. We rely on you. If you're buying physical silver and gold, good idea. Republic Trading Group. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.